Jared, first of all, thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
Very welcome.
We appreciate it. How did how did it come to be that you ended up actually working on Rocksmith Remastered? Was it something you had to approach the higher ups with? Was it something that like everyone decided that it was time to do? How did it happen?
I'd say it was fairly organic. I'd say there was a growing sense among the team at large that we wanted to do something, and it took us a little while to figure out what that should be. But ultimately, in conversations around, we tossed around the idea of, well, we should make some tweaks, make some improvements. There's room for improvement here. And so the higher ups came down to where we sit from on high and said, let's hear some ideas about what that would look like. So we wrote up some ideas and some proposals for what might be in, how it might work, what the procedure would be. And then we went to them and said, here's our pitch, basically, which was somewhere in the ballpark of where we ended up. Some things got moved around, some things we weren't able to do, some things we were able to add along the way, which was cool. But generally, I'd say we reached a consensus that it's time to do something to make Rocksmith even better than it already is.
Make Rocksmith great again? Was it something where it was like you were let's improve Rocksmith, or was it more pitching for a sequel and they're like, well, I don't think it's time for that, but we can improve what we already have with a patch update?
Well, it wasn't so much that it was like, hey, we want to do a sequel, and they're like, no. It was more like, we have all these ideas, and there's some things that we can do in a relatively short time frame that would be instant improvements for most players, and there's it's just a matter of doing it. For a sequel, we have a higher bar of innovation, of something truly worthy of a new title. So I think the idea was we can do this and keep dreaming about the future, but we didn't want to put these obvious improvements on hold. We didn't want to hold those hostage to some future product that would still be mulling over time.
Was the code malleable? I guess maybe that's the word. Like enough, like that it was kind of that it wasn't too hard to make the improvements that you set out to do, or did you find that there was like a lot of limitations based on the fact that you had to work within the space of the existing title?
I would say a little bit of both. First off, let me say that I'm not the technical guy on the team. I'm not a programmer, so I can't go into any great detail on that because I just don't know. But there were certainly times when we said, we want to try this, and the programmers would be like, "Oh, that's risky. That feels hard. That feels hard." Most of the time, when we got to those places, it wasn't so much a matter of, well, I guess we can't do that thing. It was more a matter of, oh, well, here's how we circumvent that particular issue. We're going to solve the same problem from the user's perspective, but we're going to do it without touching that system that scares you so much. But yes, there absolutely were things that we had to take a step back and say, do we really want to mess with this?
So something like the Riff repeater, the improvements, and everyone's very excited about it, but you can tell that people still want their like A, B looping sections. Is that
Sure.
just something that totally isn't possible through a patch? Like that has to be a whole reworking, or is it more because of the way the DLC was like constructed from like 2011?
Well, those two things are very closely related. It is the case that Riff Repeater is very much built on this idea of sections of content. and that's it, both in the data and in the system and in the marriage between them. That's how they talk to each other. So yes, it would be a non-trivial amount of work to do that. There's also the matter of it wouldn't just be the work to make the system understand those smaller subdivisions, but also figuring out a user interface that would allow people to do that without it being super clunky and counterintuitive and hard for new users to understand. The other thing is that we wanted very much to do what I think is even a more valuable thing, which is the scrubbing around through the track freely, whether you're in riff repeater mode or just in regular song play, just to be able to go anywhere, pause it, look at it, nudge around, have whatever you want on screen at any time, was a much more powerful thing. And it's, as is often the case, it's a matter of like, okay, well, we can do the really hard thing that conforms to people's preconceptions about what would be cool, and would make those people happy, maybe. But then the amount of work that we would spend doing that means that we don't get to do all these other cool things. Or we can solve that problem in a different way that allows us to use all this extra bandwidth to do a dozen other cool things that interact with this fix in a cool way so that it's all more than the sum of its parts.
Were you pleased with the reaction to the riff repeater?
What I've seen of it, yeah. I went back and read the chat from the Twitch yesterday, and it seemed like people were pretty jazzed about it. And I saw that you guys had just posted your article about it. So I'll be very interested to see how people respond to that. But really, what I'm excited is for people to see next week, to actually see it in action and hear how people respond to that.
Was there any thought given to like session mode, like any sort of changes, or is that just like Nick's thing that you don't really want to tamper with too much?
That's funny. It is a little bit of a black box, so that's an aspect of it. But it was do the most good for the most people, and put in changes that are going to be able to be enjoyed by a large swath of players. For a relatively beginner type player, the types of changes that people talk about in session mode, like being able to enter your own chords or those types of things, are going to be tricky things for a beginner player. So our assessment was that session mode is doing what it needs to do for those people well, and that something more ambitious would need to be rethought from scratch and not just be tweaks to the existing system. Now, what we did do, and what was a major part of our decision on the skip tuner thing, was allow people to go into session mode without having to retune to E standard. We thought that was a small win for that feature that would, especially for more advanced players who don't need the scale in front of them and just want to hear it and play along, that would facilitate that for those players.
And with the removal of tuning, how do you think that, are you expecting it to kind of affect like the data that you get from Rocksmith, or maybe how a lot of players are going to behave now towards certain like content?
I'm curious to see how people respond to that. We still very much encourage people to tune before the songs. We always in the way the system works, whenever you press skip tuner, if you're not already in tune, then we say, hey, you should probably tune. But if people don't want to, that was a major area of frustration for people. So we wanted to give people the option, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see if not being in tune causes as much frustration as having to tune. But we still actively encourage people to tune their guitars. And I would just say that not even in the context of Rocksmith, but just in life, please tune your guitar.
For God's sake.
Yeah.
Now, with the removal of tuning, is that notification like always going to be there saying, "Are you sure"?
Not really, but yes. What that means is, as before, if you went through the tuner and then later came back to a song that was in the same tuning, you don't get prompted.
Right.
So if I tune to E standard, play through a song, go to another E standard song, no tuner. That stays the same. But if you skip tuner, then we say, I don't know what tuning you're in, so I'm assuming that you need to tune. So you'll get that message until you tune, and then you won't get it again until you go into a song that requires the tuner, that requires retuning.
What about the actual sub-menu for tuning? Did you discuss maybe adding some tunings like that are already supported through custom tuning? Like if somebody wanted to tune to like the tuning for optimistic or the tuning for Creed?
We didn't really discuss that too much. Again, that's kind of a niche thing for specific users, and it'd be a significant amount of work that we'd be taking away from the other cool features that touch everybody. But as it is now, there's nothing stopping you from either A, going into that song and going through the tuner and then backing out, or B, going into the pause menu and just using the mini tuner in that screen. So we didn't feel like that was a special case that needed to be handled.
Did you tweak the tuning aspects at all, like the tuning screen? Because you've seen that there's been arguments for like 200 pages about if it's off or if it's on.
Correct.
What it wants and what it needs and what it actually is.
We didn't do a lot of work on that. We did some investigations here because we see the same reports that you do.
Yeah.
Honestly, we're unable to break it. Well, the suspicion is that it's just down to different instruments. That's a big part of our challenge with Rocksmith, is that it has to interact with thousands and thousands of different pieces of hardware that we don't have any control over. So we did a little fine tuning. I'll say this, we did a little fine tuning on almost everything. Just little tweaks here, little UI things, little like, that 0.01 should have been a 0.02. Little things here and there, little bug fixes that nobody out in the world would ever have caught, but we found in the process of revisiting this stuff. So there might be small technical improvements that would change that experience, but there was no big overhaul of the tuning experience.
The biggest things that people on Next Gen have to deal with is the enumerating DLC, and it hasn't directly been addressed by you or Dan. So if I can ask, is that something that was looked into with you and Microsoft?
That was absolutely looked into. We spent a significant amount of time looking into that. Unfortunately, it's just the way Microsoft handles DLC. We did reach out to them. I think we were able to make some teeny tiny little gains in that department, but we can't come out and say that there was any huge changes on that. I'm sorry to say.
Right. Okay. Is the reason that you can't do anything with Guitarcade because it wasn't developed in-house?
Not really, but sort of. It's because it was a completely independent system, that it's kind of a standalone system that isn't completely tied into everything else. Most of the rest of the system, Score Attack and Lessons and Learn a Song and all those things are sort of built on the same fundamental architecture, but Guitarcade is kind of its own special animal that works differently. So it would be one of those things where none of the changes we made there would be applicable broadly. It would just be like, oh, that's one little change here. And also, some of the people who are some of the people who worked on that were up in Halifax, yeah. But mostly it's because that's just a completely standalone system that's independent of everything else.
Mostly what people want from Guitarcade is a way that they can just play it without the game aspect, where they could just like endlessly play star chords or something like that. And of course, you know what they think. They're like, well, can't you just give us like 99 lives like you did in Rocksmith 1?
Yeah, just flip the switch. That fixes it.
Yeah.
Again, and this is a point where I have to defer to the technical people. You know, we certainly discussed it early on of like, I mean, we discussed everything, every feature of the game is like, do we want to touch this? Do we want to touch this? Do we want to touch this? And that was one where it was a twofold thing of, one, it's kind of a special system that requires special handling, and two, it's not played by nearly as many people as these other features like Learn a Song that we did touch.
Were there any chart modifications in the remastered patch?
I don't believe so.
We've talked about that.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, occasionally, like, a note be out of place. But no, there were no updates to note tracks or charts, as far as I know, in Remastered.
I think that's right.
Do you feel like, now that you're putting out a major patch, that can be something that might be addressed in the future? Just like a bunch of, like, chart fixes through a patch?
So that gets complicated, especially when we're talking about DLC, because DLC goes through all of these various paths out into the world through all of these other parties, depending on the platform, and we don't always have control over what that is, or it's complicated to make those changes. It's also complicated to we can't just say, oh, your DLC has been updated. We can't push that out to you guys. You would have to go and get it. So that's a complicated thing. It's also a lot of data. What are we at now? 800?
903
songs.
Yeah.
903 with however many arrangements that works out to. A couple thousand arrangements spread out over all those songs. So that's a very ambitious undertaking were we to try it. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen ever, but we're focused on getting the actual game itself to work as well as possible with whatever content, whatever songs we were put into it.
It has been discussed. It just hasn't been done.
Yeah. Because it's a matter of figuring out how.
Yeah, because really that's what it is. It's like, oh God, how do we do this?
How do we make this work?
We've versioned one or two songs out in the world. There was a tempo map problem with one of the blues songs, wasn't there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And but it was messy to even ask people, please re-download this song.
Yeah, and that was a case where, and I think the cases where we've done it have been things where we catch it very quickly after its release. So it kind of makes sense. Like, before this gets into too many hands, let's do this. But for things that have been the way they are for a very long time, it's trickier.
Like something like Freebird that you.
I know that's what people bring up a lot, and I would remind people. I think something I think about a lot is that. People experiencing the game, especially people coming to it later, just see the big mountain of content, and they play whatever they play. They play old songs, new songs. It's all the same to them. Mm-hmm. For us, we did this over the course of several years, and content that we did right after Rocksmith 1 is
Not as refined.
Not as refined. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. There was no such thing as a Rocksmith note track. There was no model to base that on when we were first making them. So now I think we've really got it down to a science in a way that at that time I think there's still really good content. The transcriptions are still extremely accurate. The leveling makes sense, but it's not at the level of pristine refinement that we have now.
Yeah, we make mistakes faster than ever now.
Yes, we can cram some mistakes into a day.
You just have to hope that Halsby and EOX don't really care that day or something like that.
We love that people care that much.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I mean, it's disappointing when we realize that, especially if it was like a transcription error. I think those are the ones that hurt us on the music side the most. That cuts through the heart. But it's awesome that people are finding them and that people are paying attention that closely to this stuff, because I know sometimes from my note tracking experience, you're sitting there like working out like is this like half a 30-second note too early, or should this be right on the beat? And you just sweat over all those decisions, and then at the end of the day you're like, well, does anybody even care or notice? But they do.
Yeah. Do it, they will.
Sometimes at various levels of disappointment or anger.
Yes, I mean, I don't want anybody to be angry.
How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I love the
Watch Dave Mustaine's hands. The songs that are coming with Remastered, was this something that the team collaborated on with licensing, or was it more these were some big things that you'd been working on and you decided to use it to celebrate the anniversary?
Any selection of songs that we ever release is always a conversation that involves both the team here in San Francisco and the licensing group and the artists, and there are a lot of people involved in those conversations. But yes, we wanted to do something exciting. We wanted to do something that would be diverse. We wanted to do something that would be that would touch a lot of different interests. And I think just something we've been seeing a lot over the last few months as we've done more of these variety packs is that I think people enjoy it. If there's like one or two songs that they can be really into, then that's a win. And we wanted everybody to feel like, oh, there was at least one or two or three or four things that I was really into. And I think that for us, they were all things that felt like they'd be really fun. And since they're a bonus for new players, we all felt like these would all be things that would be very approachable for new players.
It's a good selection of stuff, some heavy hitters. So it's good, especially to see Bob Marley. That's been something we've wanted for a long time.
We really get Elvis. It's great.
And that Outkast song, that's super fun. Jackson 5, super fun. They're all really good. Train's pretty fun. They're all good.
When are we gonna see some music from you in the game? The Jared McAdams experience.
Hey, all right. Let me lay one on you right now. How about it?
When are we getting Bert the Rock Opera?
I don't know. So, I went to music school and I studied composition. I don't know what your tolerance for 7-hour-long minimalist opera is.
Are you familiar with Lou Reed's Metal Machine music?
No, I'd love to get one in. I was gonna do one for Rocksmith 2014 and just didn't have the time to get it done.
I didn't realize that you don't have a bonus track in the game.
Yeah. I did actually for Rocksmith 1, a couple of the technique challenges, a couple of the bass technique challenges. I wrote music for sustains and for.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah,
sustains.
Yeah. It's a good one. And what was the other one I did? Maybe I don't remember. Hammer-ons or something. Anyway, I did a couple for that, and I collaborated the music for the lessons in Rocksmith 2. I was a collaboration among a lot of us on the team. But yeah, I don't have my track, so maybe someday.
However, you were heavily involved in naming the tracks from the lessons for Rocksmith 2014.
Yeah.
So the bonus pack of MP3s that was released, I don't know when that was released.
Yeah, it was like
Next Gen, I
reward.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the stuff that we use in the intro music for the stream is from that pool, and I'm giggling as I'm looking at some of these names, and I laughed one day at my desk, and somebody was like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, I'm loving these names. I'm like, "Oh, that's Jared."
Yeah.
Like almost dismissively.
What was your favorite? What was your favorite?
Well, I love Roy McKibben PI. That's pretty great.
I love that one too, and I gotta say, I think that might have been a McCune.
Oh,
That might have
okay.
been a McCune, but I love
Cul-de-sac of Despair.
That's
I love.
definitely me.
And
This.
and now this. Now this is the jazzy one that we play underneath all of it. I love Now This anyway, but it's the perfect suggestion of where that music probably came from. It was some telethon break.
Is there a feature specifically that you really were gunning for, but it just couldn't happen? And can you reveal that feature?
I have to think about this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say that feature list has been locked for so long.
Yeah,
that I don't remember.
Goes back.
What was not?
I think mostly areas where we didn't get to do what we wanted. I mean, so there was the first draft of this where it's here's every idea.
It was a pretty epic list.
Yeah, here's every idea ever.
I remember that the top 10 requests from the community were on there too.
That was a thing, from the giant thread.
Dan, go to the thread with 900 messages in it and give us a weighted list of what is most important to most people.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Did you enjoy reading that 900?
Oh, that was... But see, that's why I also like to tell people, this legitimately, if you have feedback, put it in that thread. It is not just a dumping ground. I went through it all. It drove me crazy. Because by the time I see on page 40 the same stuff that was mentioned on page 5, I'm like, we know! But it's...
But it was actually useful because it allowed us to kind of quantify how big an issue is.
Yeah, we literally counted X number of people have requests related to the tuner. X number of people have suggestions for session mode. X number of people want to be able to do alternate tunings in this thing. And that really did help, because Ubisoft is a company that is very respectful of data. They want to be able to show that the changes that we make or the things that we do are data-driven, and that these aren't just the whims of crazy people, they are the data-informed whims of crazy people.
Right.
And as such, being able to say, well, no, this is what the community wants to do, plus this is what we want to do from what we see, from using the game ourselves and going, what would be great if we could tweak it,
Yeah. And a lot of that...
It was quantified.
That's where a lot of those conversations came about, that's cool, that's a great idea, there are these 3 issues, and then sort of thinking about how is there a way that we can solve these 3 issues with one solution?
Yeah, there was a lot of that efficiency.
And I think that was the key early on to making this whole thing viable and making this, in the time frame and at the price point, right?
Yeah.
That we're doing this, was to say, how can we solve as many problems as possible with a relatively limited set of features, but again, that interact in cool ways and allow you to do cool things. One thing that you asked about things that got cut. There were things that got cut and then resurrected. So there were definitely moments of heartache.
Oh, really?
One that comes to mind is there was a long time there where we didn't think song list was going to be able to happen.
That's right.
That was a big early thing that was in the community and in the thing. And then we sort of hit on this idea as we've got this idea for filters on your song list. We've got this idea for overhauling nonstop play. what if we stick those together and solve two problems, kill two birds with one stone? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, that does make sense to do. We can do that. Please proceed.
I remember that now. I had blocked that out because when you came to me and said, we're not going to be able to do song lists.
Yeah.
I was crestfallen that day. I was like, but I really thought that, gotta face reality. We've only got so much time and so many people, and we've got to be reasonable about the scope of things that we can do. But I was like, oh, man, and no one's ever going to know. I know they'll still want it, but they're not going to know that we even tried because it's not the kind of thing that we would reveal.
Yeah.
So, and then you were like, oh, no, we found a way to bring it back. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And then since then, I've just been like, I just completely forgot about the dark times when it was not on the docket.
Yeah, and I think there were several cases that were like that, where it's like, no, you don't get to do that, but then we were able to come back and solve that problem in another way that in many cases, if not most cases, ended up being even better. Like even the Riff repeater scrubbing thing was like that. That was a thing that we had in our early pitch, and then it got cut. Like, there's no way we can make that work. And then it's like, well, what if it was this? And we're like, oh my God, that's even better, and it's easier.
That's also what makes it better.
Yeah,
it's better functionality and it's better production wise.
Right. So it was really about like filling every nook and cranny with awesome little nuggets of goodness, rather than like bolting on one huge new thing that people may or may not like.
Jared, thank you very much for taking the time to answer those questions, and really appreciate it. And I think everyone's very excited for Remastered, and everyone's saying great job from what I've seen. I haven't seen anyone saying like, "Rawr."
Yeah, well,
that'll be Wednesday.
That's great to hear. Yeah, Wednesday.
Wait until they play it, and then they'll go, "This sucks," and Wednesday will be a terrible day.
Yeah. Yeah, when does Rocksmith 2016 come out?
Exactly.
No, now it's 2018.
Right.
What do you want to see in Rocksmith 2018?
I saw that. Was that on Reddit?
Yeah.
Goodbye forever.
Farewell and good luck.
Goodbye and good luck to all of you, whoever you may be, and wherever you may be. Sayonara.